Hi, everyone. So this week we're in Charlton, Massachusetts, which is off of Route 20 beyond Worcester. We go Worcester, Auburn, Oxford, Charlton. And we're looking at the Pasture Prime players as they present Honeymoon at Graveside Manor. Did I like it? Stay tuned for this week in Massachusetts Theater. Talk to you in a bit. Bye. So this week in Massachusetts Theater, we're going to be looking at two shows. The first is Honeymoon at Graveside Manor, which is being put on by Pasture Prime Players in Charlton, Mass. And it continues throughout this week, and we'll be reviewing that one. Then we will look at a show by Deborah Zoe Laufer from City on a Hill Arts called End Days. And that will be taking place at the congregation Agadat Achim at 268 Washington Street in Leominster, Mass, starting November 8th and moving through November 15th. And just wanted to give you a heads up. The review for that one is of a final dress rehearsal because I have conflicts throughout next weekend. Next week's episode is going to be jam-packed full of reviews, so I hope you stick around for that. At the end of this episode, we're also going to take another look at the shows happening in the month of November. It's just a repeat clip from last week's podcast episode, and I don't think there's anything new that has come my way yet. If we do get something in, we'll put it on next week's radar and let you know about that next week. So and sit back, enjoy, and we'll be back in a little bit. Thank you. Bye. Pasture Prime Players presents the ghoulish goulash that is Honeymoon at Graveside Manor to varying degrees of success. While arriving on the heels of Halloween, for a show that is billed as a ghostly farce, even with the obvious effort put in by the show's cast, Pat Cook's Honeymoon at Graveside Manor pales in comparison to other superior farces and ghostly comedies. Is the play amusing? Absolutely. Could the play have been hysterical? Absolutely. While some issues stem from the Pasture Prime players' direction taken, it is the material itself that comes up short at times. The two-act play written in 1993 is supposedly set in the present. Given the above, a director can either set the show in 1993 or try to move it forward to present day. So, while assuming it is set in 2025, this assumption soon gets disproved with multiple references, such as one made of someone going out in the middle of the night to use or fax something. At another point, someone is asked to take a photo, and they use their cell phone, sans flash, at a point where someone is supposed to be blinded by the brightness of the camera's flash bulb. Where the show does succeed, thanks to the staging by cast under first-time Pasture Prime Players director Stephanie Sawyer, is in the area of physical comedy, resulting from mistaken identities, slamming doors, pratfall spit takes, and implausible coincidences. Done well in the show, the only thing missing from a couple of the romp sequences in the story is some Scooby-Doo music accompanying it. Honeymoon at Graveside Manor unfolds as horror writer Tyler Thorncraft, played by Christopher Lamb, brings his bride Marion, played by Hilary Robertson, to his family's supposedly haunted house for their Halloween honeymoon. What Marion does not realize is that the rural family home was actually once a funeral home. Both Lamb and Robertson give admirable performances as the harried married couple caught up in the antics of others who are on site at the supposedly vacated property. The couple first encounters the lovable local cleaning woman, Sophie, played by Kirsty Clemente, who, as written, carries much of Cook's biggest laugh lines. Clemente does well in sustaining the comedy and certainly earns the laughs her character receives. Bungling police officer Blair, played by Joe Sawyer, and Tyler's mouthy publicist-editor Madge Perkins, played by Don Sedler, also arrive on scene for purposes completely and thankfully unrelated to the couple's honeymoon. Blair is searching for escaped mental patient Myron Thorncraft, played by Greg Glanville, who is also on the premises to blow it up. More on that later. Perkins is on site to assist Tyler in his new novel. While the performances by Sawyer and Sedler are fine, costuming for the pair was ill-advised, as was the decision in allowing the cast to costume themselves. A trio of high school sophomores sneaks into the house intending to pull pranks on some friends. These teens, Durwood, played by Ducati Sedler, Judy, played by Tiffany Betty, and Suzanne, played by Sarah Tonkin, add much to the story as the actors, together and separately, supply the strongest performances, weaving in and out of the action on stage. For some reason, Judy and Suzanne wear pink ladies' jackets from the musical Grease, presumably for Halloween costumes. And yet, while the jackets are pleasing, at no time is there any reference made to the girls being involved in a high school production of Grease, and since there was virtually little mention made of Halloween, the assumption that people will understand the reason behind this costuming choice is lost. As the ghostly presence on site, Angela Clark worthily plays the woman, an axe-wielding, quote-unquote, spirit that stalks the honeymooning couple virtually unseen, while simultaneously is apparently not able to pass through walls as she needs to open and close every door at every turn. On numerous occasions, I have stressed the critical importance of knowing where the comedic beats are in scripts to execute the split-second timing required in such plays written by the likes of Neil Simon and others. The same is obviously true with Cook's Graveside Manor, as there feels like there should be a breakneck speed delivery reminiscent of a marvelous Mrs. Maisel episode. However, most of the breakneck speed delivery in Graveside Manor is lost, sacrificed for the sake of an actor's nuanced delivery, usually accompanied by unnecessary reactions. When staging a comedy like this, a director should always look at the script and, wherever they see a period, they should assume a laugh is there. Then, eliminating almost every single potential pause imaginable, they can continue forward to the next setup and punchline. The above could even be blamed on the playwright if no clear instructions to the above were given in the script, meaning even a more experienced ensemble would have found it difficult to successfully execute the material. More rehearsal seems to have been required in transitioning the page to the stage, as the jokes don't always land and many gags seem absent. Beyond the script, there were some backstage noises where people could be heard quite clearly, repeatedly moving from one side of the stage to the other, bumping into things along the way. More time to smooth out these rough edges would have aided Honeymoon at Graveside Manor considerably, but the earnest effort by the cast in virtually every other area is still obviously there. Thanks to the single set design, there were no scene changes required, allowing the show to move fluidly from beginning to end. Glanville is assigned the most rounded character in the Cook comedy to work with as the maniacal Myron. Glanville has a solid grasp of those aforementioned comedic beats, providing much of the show's biggest laughs. However, if afforded more opportunity to evolve, the actor might have had better differentiated Myron's two personalities, making one a little more distinctive from the other in moments where Myron is supposed to be arguing with themselves. The overall plot is absurd, but if there had been more of an opportunity to explore and refining the show, the end performances might have turned out a lot funnier. At the November 1st performance, lighting cues were well handled, but sound cues of gunshots were out of sync with the actions on stage. At approximately 2 hours with one intermission, for a night filled with kooks, spooks, and surprises, book your reservation to see Honeymoon at Graveside Manor, which continues for Pasture Prime players at 4 Dresser Hill Road in Charlton until November 9th, 2025. Up next for Pastor Prime Players will be a landmark play from esteemed writer Lanford Wilson, the groundbreaking Hot L Baltimore, in April 2026. For tickets and more information, contact Pastor Prime Players at 508-248-5448. And to read the full METRMag review, visit METRMag.com. Hi, everyone. Just want to take a minute here and talk a little bit about what goes into running METRMag and doing these reviews for theater companies all over the state. Just to remind people, where I am and where I'm from and, how I approach these things. I've been reviewing shows since 2011. Started off with the Worcester Telegram and Gazette as a correspondent. And they brought me on as their main reviewer for shows at the Hanover and a lot of the area theater companies. And then around 2018, the paper eliminated their entertainment section, pretty much gutted it. And as a result, it afforded me an opportunity to create METRMag, where I could broaden the scale of my reviews to encompass the entire state. And that's, for the last 7 years, that's worked out pretty successfully. And we are associated with a lot of great theaters that keep inviting us back to do reviews of their shows. And, they appreciate the attention and the critiques that are provided by METRMag. Good or bad, they'll accept it all. And we never try to be mean-spirited in any way. And anyone who, feels that they've been slighted, that was not our intent. We critique fairly. And I'm certainly not on any high horse here. I've directed shows for over 30 years, and I've had some marvelous successful shows, and I've had some real turkeys. I've had some really awful, awful shows, and I'm the first to admit it. And I won't blame anybody for those shows except for me, because ultimately it falls on the director's shoulders. But I try to use those experiences as learning experiences, to better myself as a director and better myself as a theater critic, and understanding where groups' strengths and weaknesses may lay. And I think I have been fair in all my reviews, or at least I have tried to be. And I have never tried to hurt anyone or been malicious or mean-spirited to anyone. And I hope that any negative criticism has been taken with the spirit intended, which is to hope that they will take this information, the theater companies will take this information and use it to improve upon certain areas in future productions. And if that's proved beneficial for some, that's terrific. I'm glad to hear it, because that's always the goal. And we want people to enjoy theater. Now, a lot of my contemporaries, my colleagues, they don't cover the theaters that I cover. And because it's not a Boston theater company, or it's not a professional venue. And what they do is fine, but there's a lot of great theater companies throughout the state that deserve more of a focus. And we try to give them that exposure. And I hope that has proved beneficial. And I hope you have found it beneficial and these reviews beneficial. And, now as we get into our 10th episode of this podcast, I hope we're getting better as we progress. I mean, I recently went back to the first few reviews I posted, for METRMag, and, just the look and the feel of the reviews. at the time in 2018 to where we are today. And I can see an evolution. I can see that, becoming more comfortable in our own skin, and the reviews, improving in terms of quality, in terms of content. And I hope that this podcast will follow a similar path, and that people will continue to enjoy both the METRMag website and the reviews and This Week in Massachusetts Theater. So thank you, and on with the reviews. Bye-bye. Warning: the following review contains spoilers. Note: the following review is of a final dress rehearsal. From City on a Hill Arts, the end days comes to Leominster as two geeky high schoolers are faced with the immortal question: can science and religion harmoniously coexist? Perhaps not as harmonious as some would like it, if playwright Deborah Zoe Laufer's two-act play End Days is any indication. Back in 2023, METRMag interviewed the End Days author, with Laufer recalling how she would rush home from kindergarten to, quote, tell my mother the unbelievable thing that happened that day. My mind was blown away by some new revelation, and I needed to tell the world. Now, does this imply Laufer herself might have been perceived as, with all due respect, a little bit of a geek in high school? The playwright responded, I don't know, but I was definitely geeky. I was bad at studying things I didn't care about, but I loved English, reading, and writing. Everything else had to come through osmosis. Now, Laufer would go on to study acting at State University of New York at Purchase. Laufer's first play, Miniatures, drew the attention of playwright Marcia Norman, who invited Laufer to study playwriting at the Juilliard School, where Norman taught. Laufer accepted the invitation and graduated from Juilliard in 2000. Since then, Laufer's plays have been staged and enjoyed all over the country. In 2008, Laufer won the Harold and Mimi Steinberg New Play Citation from the American Theater Critics Association, or ATCA, for her play End Days, now staged by City on a Hill Arts in Leominster. In the show, perceptively directed by Michael Knight, we encounter several characters, each facing a turning point in their life before being faced with the ultimate turning point, i.e., the end days, a biblical reference to the apocalyptic end of humanity via the predicted, quote-unquote, resurrection of Christ. I use the word predicted in quotes because the date of Christ's return keeps changing, as if it were on a continuously shaken Etch-a-Sketch pad, and for when exactly this end days is supposed to take place. But for the characters we meet in Laufer's heartwarming play, it is now, or at least in the time and place where End Days is set, which is only about 2 years after the events of September 11, 2001. It is September 20th, 2003 to be exact, fast approaching a very important Wednesday. One of the clever devices Laufer uses in the play is for one actor, in this case City on a Hill actor Lucas Cardwell, to portray both actual renowned physicist Stephen Hawking, who was still quite alive during this time, and biblical idol Jesus, who was and is actually still quite dead, although some might disagree. Hawking can only be seen and heard by high schooler Rachel Stein, played by Audrey Levensky, while Jesus can only be seen and heard by Rachel's born-again Christian mother, Sylvia, played by Cherry Lynn Zenger. Zenger impresses as Sylvia, not trying to make the character appear as a obtuse, one-dimensional religious zealot. Now, Sylvia's husband, Arthur, played by Tim Daughter, cannot see either Hawking or Jesus, and even if he could, probably wouldn't find their sudden appearance all too surprising, as he is practically comatose himself these days. Rachel, as marvelously played by Levensky, is in full goth mode, having completely become estranged from her parents, resulting from her mother's religious rantings and her father's complete withdrawal from life after his witnessing a horrific event from 9/11. As Arthur, Daughter does well, but the evolution from where his reclusive character begins in the story to where Arthur winds up by around the middle, seems to happen abruptly and without a clear, concise moment, or, if you'll pardon the expression, revelation. Inserting himself into the family's life comes neighborhood nudge, Nelson Steinberg, played by Ben Wilder, who first comes off like a long, lanky, white Elvis impersonator-clad Steve Urkel to the Steins' dysfunctional Winslow family. Wilder is adept at playing up to this Urkel-like behavior, especially in the full-on obsession Nelson has with Rachel. As we get to know Nelson more, though, he becomes less stalkery and more of a sympathetic character, especially after we see him constantly ridiculed and bullied, mostly by Ben Spur and Tracy Bartlett, who portray multiple unnamed characters in the show, and yet Nelson never loses any of his cheerful, positive, or optimistic outlook. Nelson quickly becomes the catalyst for everything that follows, embracing and impacting the Stein family in ways they could never have conceived. The City on a Hill Arts cast performances here are all quite insightful, with Wilder and Levinsky splendidly bringing much of the story's heart to the forefront. Wilder and daughter have some wonderful exchanges together on stage, as do Levinsky and Zinger with Cardwell's respective characters. Cardwell as Hawking and Jesus artfully conducts a delicate balancing act in bringing a humorous flair to both roles, without reducing either to be seen as some sort of absurd, disrespectful mockery. Similarly, Laufer has gone to great lengths in the script not to demean anyone's religious belief or doctrine. The set design is minimalist, with some occasionally anachronistic props on hand given the time and place in which the story is set. There's a TV set combo, VCR combo, and a telephone with a cord attached. This may be by design, by the instructions in the script, although by 2003, many homes probably would have moved on to DVD players and cordless phones. However, the addition of several comic panels along the sides and back wall of the stage adds a nice look and feel to the show, as if we were watching some faith-based anthology series episode. As this critique is of a final dress rehearsal with the full cast, not every technical element was perfect, and the actors were still finding their way through some of the dialogue. Yet overall, there's still a lot to be enjoyed here, thanks to the affecting material provided by the playwright and the execution by the cast and creative team at City on the Hill Arts. Of course, in the end, pun intended, it is Laufer's sensitively constructed tale, which both amuses and entertains, and if it prompts some discussions about the best way for science and religion to coexist, all the better. While the next part of this sentence may read a little cryptic, Endays continues at Congregation Agadat Achim in Leominster until November 15th, 2025, so get yourselves ready, as you wouldn't want to be left behind. For their, God willing, forthcoming 2026 season, City on a Hill Arts will present Kenneth Lonergan's The Waverly Gallery, beginning in February. For tickets and more information, contact City on a Hill Arts at 978-906-5081, by email at director@cityonahillarts.org, or visit www.cityonahillarts.org. To read the full review, visit METRMag.com. As we mentioned in last week's episode, we want to take a look at the shows coming up during the month of November. Continuing shows in Massachusetts include Hamilton by Lin-Manuel Miranda, continuing from Broadway in Boston at the Citizens Opera House through November 2nd. The Counter by Megan Kennedy continues at Umbrella Arts Center in Concord through November 9th. Tick, Tick, Boom by Jonathan Larson also continues at Umbrella Arts through November 23rd. Sardines, a comedy about death, written and performed by Chris Grace, continues at the Huntington Theatre Company in Boston through November 16th. The Cher Show, with a book by Rick Elise, concludes at the North Shore Music Theatre in Beverly on November 2nd. Robert Harling's Steel Magnolias is playing at the Majestic Theatre in West Springfield through November 30th. Murder for Two by Joe Canosian and Kellen Blair is playing at the Greater Boston Stage Company in Stoneham through November 9th. Wait Until Dark by Frederick Knott and Jeffrey Hatcher, not Jaffrey Hatcher as shown here, continues at Cannon Theatre in Devons through November 9th. Lizard Boy, a new musical by Justin Huertas, is now playing at Speakeasy Stage Company in Boston through November 22nd. Honeymoon at Graveside Manor by Pat Cook is a Halloween treat from Pasture Prime Players in Charlton, Mass., premiering October 31st and running through November 9th. Connected the Musical by Catherine Denny is now playing at Neshoba Players in Westford, Mass. Through November 2nd, 2025. For tickets or more information on any of these upcoming shows, you can contact the theaters directly or use the links available from the listings on the METRMag site. Looking ahead through November, it will be a busy month with a plethora of new shows in Massachusetts, including Mania, the ABBA tribute, returning to the Hanover Theatre for the Performing Arts in Worcester for one night only on November 1st at 7:30 p.m. A Sherlock Carol by Mark Shanahan debuts at the Lyric Stage Company in Boston from November 1st through December 21st. She Kills Monsters by Qui Nguyen from Concord Players will run from November 2nd through November 22nd. HMS Pinafore, or The Last That Loved a Sailor by Gilbert and Sullivan, will be a 50th anniversary celebration from Valley Light Opera in Northampton, Mass., running from November 6th through November 9th. Beehive, the 60s Musical by Larry Gallagher plays at the Barnstable Comedy Club in Barnstable, Mass. From November 6th through November 23rd. Summer 1976 by David Auburn will debut at Central Square Theatre in Cambridge, running from November 6th through November 30th. Sherlock Holmes and the Case of the Jersey Lily by Katie Furgette will unfold live on stage courtesy of the Washington Street Players in Holliston from November 7th through November 15th. The Thanksgiving Play by Larissa Fasthorse will be performed by Burlington Players from November 7th through November 22nd. Hadestown by Naz Mitchell will play a very limited engagement at PPAC in Providence, Rhode Island from November 7th through November 9th. Complexions Contemporary Ballet will premiere at the Hanover Theatre as part of their new dance series for one night only on November 7th at 7:30 p.m. Steve Martin and Martin Short bring their show Dukes of Funnytown to the Box Center Wang Theatre in Boston from November 7th through November 8th. End Days by Deborah Zoe Laffer will be performed by City on a Hill Arts in Leominster, Mass. From November 8th through November 15th. Harry Potter and the Cursed Child will hit the stage at the Emerson Colonial Theatre in Boston from November 9th through December 20th. Fun Home, the musical by Janine Tesori, Lisa Cron, and Alison Bechdel, will be performed by the Huntington Theatre Company in Boston from November 14th through December 14th. 'Twas the Night Before by Cirque du Soleil will entertain the holiday masses at the Box Center Wang Theatre in Boston from November 26th through December 14th. And finally, at least for now, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat by Andrew Lloyd Webber will light up the stage at Theatre at the Mount in Gardner, Mass. From November 28th through December 7th, 2025. Again, for tickets or more information on any of these upcoming shows, you can contact the theaters directly or use the links available from the listings on the METRMag site. So that's it for this week. Next week, we're going to be looking at 4 new shows. The first is Kim's Convenience from the Huntington Theatre Company. We're going to also be reviewing She Kills Monsters with Concord Players. Summer 1976 takes place at Central Square Theatre in Cambridge. And then we will be reviewing Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which will be playing at the Emerson Colonial. So make sure to tune in again next week for episode 11 of This Week in Massachusetts Theatre. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.